What do you get? Because I want to show you something in some of your data. I want you to be certain about something. All right, so Sarah's 13.24. What's yours say? 13. Okay? So I want you to keep that in mind, because that's going to become important here in a minute in terms of total number of hours allocated to you. What's yours? 27 exact? Okay, so you don't have a rounding issue. How about you, Tracy? Okay, so you hold on to that. Think about that 18, because in the budget grid it says 18. You get an actual of 18.39, right? Okay.
I have my standing grid.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you're going to use ninth ortho? Okay, so ninth ortho is 6714, it's number of patient days. Just divide that by 365. And you're going to come up with 18.39, just like it has there. Okay? The budget grid says 18. Keep that in mind. Okay? Budget. You're 20 exact? You have no rounding here.
I don't have.
You're lucky.
All of the extra numbers on mine. I only have what I gave you.
Okay.
I only have that. Oh, wait,
Now you got to pull down?
no. I don't think it's on the bottom.
Yes. Nope.
No, because this is,
Okay.
the
Oh, this
reason
is
is, this
okay.
is the one that went out to the staff, and I
Okay.
didn't want to confuse the issue.
All right, so let's use ninth ortho data. Ninth ortho has 33 beds on their unit for the occupancy rate. Their ADC is 18, right? So the occupancy percent is 55% on that unit. So does that unit have capacity opportunity?
Yeah.
So Geraldine, you're 20. What's your capacity on your unit? 20? Is it 20 on your unit? So you got no room for growth. None whatsoever.
Well, I'm usually 21, but of course it's showing up 20 now because SSU has 50.
SSU has one.
So 20.
And this is that important, what we talked about, is volume rises, revenue tends to rise in direct proportion while cost lags. That's why these are built in a stepwise fashion around the ratios, because you can afford to lag cost of incremental nurse increases, because you can't add a 0.4 nurse, fundamentally. I can't cut a nurse in fourth, I could, but I'd get in trouble. I can't quarter you and send fourth of you in to take care of a patient. That wouldn't work very well, would it? No? We need to know those couple of things, because that's our starting point. Okay? So everybody has the budget grid in front of them.
I just
right?
found mine with that.
Okay? So I'm going to switch over to the budget grid, and we're going to start walking through how to do this. But let's talk about an FTE first. What is an FTE? This is very important. Now, we talk about a 0.6, we talk about a 0.9. Most of our nurses and techs are 0.9s, right? Okay, that's our choice to label them that way. But from a budgeting standpoint, what is an FTE always worth? How do we, what's our basis for building budgets? Always, one FTE. So how much is an FTE?
One full-time employee.
It's one, okay?
It's a
But what it, how much is it worth in total, in terms of total number of hours, and how are those hours calculated?
28.
It's a 28,
Mhm.
okay? So one FTE equals 2,080 hours. How do we come to 2,080 hours? True.
40 hours.
40 hours a week, or 8 hours a day, 5 days per week. If you, with no vacation. We'll get to vacation in a minute, because we gotta give vacation, okay? So from a budget perspective, you always build a budget based on this right here. Never, don't worry about 0.9s. Your choice of how you divide the pie once we get there is up to you. How many 0.9s you use, how many 0.6s you're gonna use, how many 0.1s, whatever the case may be. Okay, and this is that concept of an FTE. Any number of positions or individuals that combine to provide the hours of one full-time equivalency is still one FTE. So if I used a 0.5, how many 0.5s would I need to get to one FTE? Two, right? If I were only going to use true part-times at 0.1, I need 10 bodies at 0.1, right? That's that concept. How you divide the pie is completely up to you, based on the optimization of the labor dollars associated with that pie. Does that make sense? Okay. That's our accepted definition of 2,080 hours per year. Okay, so we got to remember the fundamentals of the FTE before we can ever get started with the budget. So let me switch over. Let's start walking through this budget grid so you guys can understand what we're looking at and why. Number one, as you use this functionally, the only places where you truly have to input data, because I've set the formulas to automate the rest of this, okay? And that's kind of your value-added thing to take out of this class once you know how to use this, is the areas in yellow. Okay, that's where you're going to be inputting data in some form. Everything else has a calculation associated with it to give you the correct number, okay? So your budget patient days, if they come down and tell you that it's 6,714, that's what goes there. They give you a standard of 11.409. Whatever your standard is, you simply input that standard there. Okay? And they tell you what your PTO percentage is. And that's based on, how do they come to that number? Based on your previous 12 months of use. Okay, now you had a problem with that. You need to think about this, the PTO use from a managerial standpoint. What is the fundamental problem with allowing too much PTO?
You don't have staff.
You don't get the comparable number of hours.
Oh,
Okay, so if you willy-nilly, people are just calling out sick constantly, it's not controlled, or if you give too much PTO, and I'm not saying that, please don't, cameras on, don't, you've got to give people vacation. We all know that. There's an acceptable use rate of PTO, okay? We generally look at that somewhere around 5 to 6%, and that would be about right. Because you add up all the hours, 76,600 hours, and 5% of that is a significant amount of time when you think about it on a per employee basis overall. But if you incrementally increase this, it's going to fundamentally, in this budget process in your actual grid, equivalently bring down the number of hours available for you to use on a productive basis. So it's going to pinch you a little bit in terms of how many bodies you can use to care for your patients and stay on budget. And that's actually happened a little bit because, and this is something to pay attention to, as you go through the course of the year from a control perspective, are you still on target? For instance, at Ninth Ortho, are they still running at 7% currently, or has it creeped up a little bit? Because inherently that creep up will force them off of their hours mark from a variability standpoint. Yes, ma'am?
does that include low census? That's use of PTO for low census.
They don't care
and
when it's
vacation.
when
So if you are off, say, on how many people you have scheduled, and we didn't base it on, say for instance, you scheduled them all the same, so now I have a lot of low census now. How much does that impact?
Say again?
Like if that, since that includes low census, because I'm ending up giving a lot of low census right now, it's just that time of the year for the double I. Does it all average out in the end?
Well, let me ask you this, and what we're teaching you now, is there a way to adjust your budget so you don't have to give low census?
Yeah, I would have to change.
Yeah, this process here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you kind of understand in advance where those lags are going to be, so you can plan for it, so you don't inadvertently overschedule and then have to back them out on low census.
Okay. And ask people if they would like to take their vacation. Would you like to go on vacation?
But you can track this overall month to month.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all this information is available in Kronos.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, I'd have to check ClickView, but I believe PTO percent is available in Kronos, or PTO FTE is available in Kronos, because how can I convert 7% of these hours to an FTE? Somebody do this for me real quick. Take 76,600 times 0.07. What do you get?
See what times, what was
Take
that?
76,600 hours times 0.07.
490. I just did that in my head.
No, it's 49.
No, 49. Yeah. Oh, I needed another zero.
What is it?
I said 490.
It's just a
Or just a thousand.
Times 0.07 for 7%.
5,300.
All right, so divide that by 2080.
2.5.
So there's 2.57 FTEs of PTO in this budget. So if you look on ClickView and it's telling you in PTO based on FTEs, that's how you convert that process back to hours to know about where you are relative to your budget.
Can we, so where is the 76?
That is based on, okay, so 76,600,
600.
yeah, sorry, 76,600
Oh, well, then our number is on.
is, yeah, 76,600 comes from, is equal to 6714 times 11.409.
So it's the budgeted patient days, times worked hours, patient day.
Or your ADC times your standard, either way.
Okay.
Yep. So right here, if you click on that cell, it will tell you the formula. One way to learn this, anywhere where there's a formula, if you click up there in the text bar, it'll tell you where the cells are that make that formula, so you can see it. So in this case, the required annual hours is equal to budgeted patient days times your work standard. Okay? Now, let me ask you this. That's 76,600. Look on 9th Ortho's grid, somebody who's got it. I want you to take, if you read this grid, your target for this unit is 205.4 hours per day. I want you to take 205.4 times 365.
$74,825.
See the problem? There is a difference, pretty significant, almost an FTE's worth of difference. Why is that?
What is that?
What did I tell you your original ADC was? 18.39, divided based on that. What has happened in this process? And anybody that has a rounding error needs to pay attention to this. What has happened? They rounded down to the nearest whole number. So 0.39 on average patients per day is worth almost an FTE of time on this unit. Does that make sense? Because what really should be happening is this unit should be running at almost 210 hours per day. Now fortunately, they're not a growth unit. They're actually in a decline, so this doesn't bump them up against the problem of constraint of hours. Does that make sense? Because if they had been a growth unit and this was done, they wouldn't have enough hours to handle the growth and the staffing issues, okay? By FTEs of time. So you do want to pay attention to that, because the reason being is that there is a disconnect in actual hours allocated to you on a daily basis based on that rounding. So if you've got a rounding, you do need to understand how far it was rounded down and what the number of hours of impact that is, and ask that question at least. Because if you're really tight and you're running on the edge, does it make sense to not round it down and put it to the actual average ADC? Does that make sense? Pay attention to that. A couple of you do have a rounding issue in your budgets. Okay? All right. So we've determined the number of patient days, right? That's given to us, or that's forecasted. And this is why you use the forecast, because what did I tell you about this unit from a budgeting standpoint in our forecast earlier? What did we anticipate the forecast actually being for this unit? Almost 1,000 less patient days than what's here, based on the trend. So if they set this and you don't hit it, you're responsible for that overage, right? And managing to what the actuals are. It's a lot. When you start talking about number of bodies and FTEs positions. Vice versa, if you're showing a trend up, because what did I say about simple averaging with respect to historical analysis for projection? If you average it always lags the actual of where it's gonna be, either up or down, right? So again, if your trend is going this way, and your forecast will always, on an average basis, lag the trend, okay? So in an upward trend, you may be here on what your actual was of, say, 6,000, and you may, the forecast, based on an average basis, may tell you that you only need 5,500, so you're short 500 patient days relative to the labor you need, right? In the same way going down, it's always going to lag. That's why I don't like average forecasting when trends involved. And if you're flat, like Geraldine has got, really, she's at capacity, she's flat, she can use an average. She can continue to say she's got 20 because that's what she's got overall. It's not going to grow, it's not going to, unless it starts going down, for whatever reason, we come up with outpatient heart failure clinics. I don't know. You never know what's going to happen. But when you're faced with these issues around growth or decline, you really need to use exponential smoothing, like what's in the forecast model, so you get closer. Because actually this unit needs to be recalibrated, probably down to about 5,400 patients. Okay?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
So basically, so if you have, like, I'm sitting trying to count my FTE, so on paper, I'm like right at budget. But if I have some PRN people who work extra hours, doesn't that calculate your FTEs too?
Yes.
Because when I get my report, it says your budget versus actual, so if a month you have a lot of PRN help, it may look like you went over budget. But really,
Potentially, depending on the hours you used, yeah.
because you've got PRN who help with vacation, sick leave, and so if they're .1, they're working 40 hours a week for a schedule.
Yeah, because, well, you're gonna get a disconnect between paid versus productive in that at times, yes. So we're gonna get to how you kind of calculate that out, because this budget process is designed to tell you exactly how many bodies and FTEs you need, even with vacation in play, so that you don't inadvertently go over your number of hours, okay? All right, so we got average daily census, we calculated our required number of hours, and we're gonna use 76,600 under the assumption on this budget, just to show you how it works, okay? So, we've got our basics. So how many FTEs do we need overall for this unit? Don't look down there because it's already there. Can't cheat. How do we determine that? So I told you an FTE is worth 2,080 hours. What would be the simple thing to do?
Divide 7600.
Divide 76,600 by 2080.
But it doesn't
Would
account
you-
for
Would you undervalue the number of FTEs you need at that point, or overvalue?
under
You would undervalue the number of FTEs you need. Why?
PTO.
Because you have not accounted for the time off people are going to take.
Right.
Okay? So we've got to determine what is the actual number of hours per FTE against the required number of hours of patient care. So in order to do that, and in Ninth Ortho's case, it's 7%. So you take 2080 times 0.07 or point, what's the quicker way to do it from a math standpoint?
Point.
What do you want, what are you after? You're after the residual.
90, so it'd be like 93%.
So it'd be
It
0.93.
would be 0.93.
What's that? Should be 1976. I'm pretty good at math, but I'm not a genius.
I got 1931.
See? I'm pretty good
Am
at
I wrong?
math.
Say 1976 would be equal to 95.
1934.4. So that's the actual, when you account for PTO time. Now let me caveat this. What are we really talking about in PTO time versus the rest of the time? We're really talking about productive versus non-productive time. In our environment, and from a budget standpoint, the only non-productive time counted is what? PTO.
PTO.
So if we changed our policy to say PTO, shared governance, education, all this other stuff, then you would count that in. So you're really talking about how much, what's the percent of non-productive time this employee is not going to be available for direct patient care related activities for whatever reason. In this case, it just happens to be PTO because that's our standard of mental health and how we do this. Okay?
Quick
Yes, sir.
question, and if I'm jumping ahead, forgive me, but, so when I read the book, it says you should have enough people to offset, so you're not using the massive amount of overtime
That's correct.
to cover vacation. So what happens if you have more FTEs, but then one schedule, nobody wants time off? So then you're scheduling more nurses than
And
you're
you
allowed,
have
more
low
CNAs
census.
than you're allowed to have.
You have to assume, and that's where you downplay in your mixes how many PRNs you have, because they're really there at your will.
Right.
We have minimal requirements of 24 hours per 6-week schedule on them right now. So they're really there at your leisure. So that's where I'm gonna show you at the end, over here on the right, where we get to how much premium pay or overtime FTEs we need to cover, and how we're gonna choose to do that, and that can be with those part-time people, because if you don't then need it because you don't use all of that time, then it don't work. Now, you run a risk of alienating them and then they quit because they don't get hours, but that's kind of where your cushion.
But at least you don't have the pressure of guaranteeing hours, but full-time, you have to get them hours.
Yes, that's correct. Yep. So how do we then determine the number of FTEs? So we know that actually this person is going to work 1,934 hours per year. And then from a budget standpoint, you have to assume that every employee is going to take the maximum amount of time allowed. Okay? I.e. in this case, 7% of their time. Okay? So how do we get to the number of required FTEs? What do we need to know? What do we do? And don't use the worksheet because it's already there. Don't get cheated. So we said 76,600 divided by 2080 earlier, right? So we've adjusted 2080. It'll come back. So we take 76,600 divided by 1934.4. That tells you the true number of FTEs you need to run this unit. So if you look right here, required FTEs, I have a little bit more complex formula, but it's essentially what we just did on the board. Okay? I'm taking 76,600 divided by 93% of 2080, basically. The 1 minus B5 is 1 minus 0.07, gets you to 93. So if you take on your calculator 1 minus 0.07, functionally, you'll get 0.93.
But you can just put in the actual point. You can still put it in.
You could, but I'm doing this because the reason I do this, because here's why I do what I do. Okay, watch this on the formula. If that went to 8%, so I typed in 8, what happens? It automatically recalculates for you. That's the advantage of doing formulas this way, is that you minimize the need to change it. Yeah.
I don't need to know.
All right. So do this. Hester, I'm gonna make sure you understand the concept here. So when we want to look at how much is left of the 2080, right? We need to know, we said they're going to work 7%. They're not going to be there 7% of the time. So if we assume they're going to be there 2,080 hours, 7% of that is not going to, they're going to be on vacation or sick, right? So we're not really after the 7% because that takes an extra step to then subtract that 7% from 2080, right? What we're really after is what's left after 7%, okay? So to do that, you're really